Tanse, Kimara Hashif. My name is Ann Horse, and I am Plains Cree from Thunderchild First Nation in central Saskatchewan. In the early 1500s, horses were introduced to the Americas by the Europeans. The Cree word for horse is misdatim, and it means big dog. By the 1600s, the Crees became middlemen between the Hudson's Bay Company and other First Nations tribes. The Crees would trade furs for copper pots, mirrors, beads, as well as guns and ammunition, and trade them to other First Nations tribes for furs, and trade them back to the Hudson's Bay Company for more supplies. By the 1700s, the Crees began to move westward toward the prairies to avoid the settlers and the land development that was happening. The Crees that moved to the prairies lived along the Saskatchewan River. In the early 1800s, the first residential school opened in the Mohawk Territory in Brantford, Ontario. By the late 1800s, Treaties 1 through 7, I should say, were signed between the Dominion of Canada on behalf of the Queen of Great Britain and the First Nations groups Cree, Saulteaux, Nakota, and Dene. The treaties would allow First Nations to provide or receive support in times of famine, as well as support for the changing times in their living situation. Other Crees had also moved farther westward toward the Rocky Mountains to avoid further settlement and land development, as well as to follow the diminishing buffalo herds. By the late 1950s, Indian Affairs regional inspectors recommended doing away with the residential school system. By 1960, approximately 10,000 students were attending 60 schools across the country, including my mother. While in the residential school, she was beaten and abused for speaking her language and practicing her culture. Although I did not attend residential school, I still suffered the effects of. I was raised in a Catholic home and was taught to speak English. I do not know my language fluently, and now that I'm 33 with a child of my own, I am learning my language so that I can pass it down to my son. I am also unfamiliar with parts of my culture and only practice what I know, such as smudging, drumming, and dancing. I have never been inside of a sweat lodge, and although I have been to a Sundance, I was not informed on what it means. What is the purpose of a Sundance? These are aspects of my culture that I would like to learn and pass down to my future generations. Thank you for listening. All my relations, hi, tafdale.